Okay, let me test this now. Green screen. I hear nothing. All right. All right. All right. Green screen. Ah, hold on there. I'm going live. I have to discuss that issue here. So I'm going live. Having some little issues. I should be able to iron it out. Okay. Um, check this out. I'm gonna share this with some people. All right. So I'm live. Check it now and see what's going on. Mhm. No, oh, it look. Mm. Share the live. Share the live. Just share it. All right. Okay. Uh, there's always this pressing issue ever since the US decided to impose tax on other countries. You know, the issue is whether or not it is fair to impose tax on a country like Jamaica or even other countries in the Caribbean. And I say this given the limited trading, the small economy that, say, a country like Jamaica has, and the limited trading that we do with the United States of America. And I am quite sure that some will present arguments for and arguments against the tariff. But as it relates to Jamaica, I want to think that the effect on the Jamaican economy of a 10% tariff, if levied against us, can be devastating in a lot of sense. It can also be a tool that forced Jamaica to look at ramping up our productive machinery, ramping up our food security, and ensuring that we can feed ourselves. Because when you look at the Jamaica now has a balance of trade situation with the United States, and it's imbalanced in a lot of sense, because we import more from the US than what we export to them. In fact, I was looking at an article that suggests that up to I think it was the end of 2024, that Jamaica's balance of trade with the United States stands at 4.63 billion US dollars. So clearly, America is already profiting off us because we have a balance of trade situation with them, which means that we export more from them than what we import to them. What a 10% tax or tariff levied on Jamaica will do So if we do a critical examination, it certainly will reveal that a 10% imposing a 10% tariff on Jamaica export could result in a significant economic and of course diplomatic drawbacks. Many and this could harm both countries. There's no doubt. All right, first, Jamaica is a weaker party in the trade dynamics. Like I said, we import more from them than what we export to them. So we are the weaker party. We import substantially more than we export. And its economy and our economy depends heavily on access to the US market. We can't bypass the US market because the US, up to now, even with the limited amount of export goods that we send to the US, it is our major market. So what a tariff would do in essence, it would render Jamaican goods less competitive in the US market. That's what it will do. There's no doubt that our goods will be less competitive, right? So it's going to reduce demand and it's going to threaten vital industries such as bauxite and alumina, agro-processing, and niche export like Blue Mountain coffee, which is a world brand all over. This would lead to job losses in Jamaica. Of course, we have to brace ourselves for that because this is the impact of that 10% tariff. It will lead to job losses in Jamaica, of course. It will reduce our foreign exchange earnings and broader economic stability in Jamaica. I hear the Prime Minister came out and saying that Jamaica is prepared for shocks. But I wonder if the Prime Minister really examine what this 10% tariff will do to us in terms of the economic instability, the job losses that will, because our industries out here definitely to compete in the wider US market, they will have to cut labor because they couldn't afford the labor. And then the second one is that such a massive risk retaliation we will see. However modest it be, Jamaica might impose its own duties on US imports. We'll have to put some duty on it. So clearly that is the kind of retaliation and that is going to drive clearly what we call a trade war. And more significantly, it could deepen its trade ties with China. And probably this is where we need to go. Because if the US goods, if trading in the US market is becoming more expensive, we'll have to find a much cheaper market elsewhere where we can get the same goods at a cheaper rate. Granted, people will argue that the goods coming from China is somewhat, it's not as durable as goods produced, say, by U.S. manufacturers. But the thing about it is that China is producing most of the goods now that the world is consuming all over. So clearly, it might deepen our trade with China. Now we also have to look at the EU bloc. We have to look at other partners also. So we have to reduce U.S. influence in the Caribbean region. And that is a sticky situation because U.S. still remain our number one trading partner, regardless, right? So yes, the cost of American consumers must not be overlooked also, because some of the things that we send to America from Jamaica, they're mainly consumed in the diaspora. And we have a very significant diaspora population in America. So will they be able to afford the goods? And we know that Jamaican goods in the American market is already expensive. So will they be able to afford it? So that's another thing that we have to look at. So tariffs ultimately function as a tax on imports. That's exactly what it is, a tax on imports. So prices for Jamaicans good would rise in the diaspora. Will they be able to cope with the increase in price? So for the ackee, the breadfruit, the yam, the banana, right? So clearly, the consumer choice will reduce significantly and increase in costs for US retailers and buyers, the ones who buy it for us and the retailers up there. Like I have a friend in Miami, who buys Jamaican goods. I know he's going to have some problems where that is concerned. So, yes, this tariff will undermine the long-standing trade and development frameworks, such as the Caribbean Basin initiatives. Certainly will. And broader U.S. foreign policy goals. And bear in mind that Jamaica is a strategic partner in the Western Hemisphere. Imposing these punitive economic measures risk eroding the goodwill that the United States really, have with us right now. Of course, regional stability, particularly at a time when global alliances are being redrawn. We see where the Trump administration is, with his America First policy and encouraging isolationism and the imbalance that he now bring and the whole revamping of world trade. No, that of course could impact severely also as a result of these tariffs. Lastly, and perhaps most importantly, there's a fundamental question of economic justice. And we look at this against the background of the trade deficit. It is ethical for a powerful nation. The question is it ethical for a powerful nation to impose this economic pressure on a small country like us? So it shows you that the Trump did not, I don't think they sat down and they look at the countries and they look at the economies of scale and try to tailor whatever they were doing, to suit the or to help these developing countries and their economies. So this is the main issue that we face right now as a country. We have a very unstable president in the United States who does things without any scientific analysis or the economic analysis of how it can affect small countries that have very small economies. Jamaica, for example, that has this balance of trade deficit with the United States. We don't need a 10% tariff. It should probably look at the countries in isolation, look at their economies, look at the trade situation with the US, and decide whether a 10% are probably. I'm not saying it should impose tariffs, but a 10% tariff. You look at a 2% tariff, for example, and I don't think any Jamaicans would squeal, even though it would have some economic impact on our manufacturers and our producers out here. Still, but we would say that it is manageable. Yes, Finley, I see you. Big up, big up, big up. Yes. We could say that it is manageable, against that background. So, yes, the question is it ethical for a powerful country like the United States to place these economic pressures on a small country? Developing island state facing structural economic changes. Jamaica, has faced structural economic changes for quite a while. And even though efforts have been made and it started under the former PNP government to create the fiscal discipline that is needed to have have an economy that can grow, and of course to some extent this government have continued, which but yes, such a move would be seen as punitive and exploitative. In fact, I think we are being exploited. Small countries like Jamaica and other Caribbean countries, with this, it's an exploitative regime that Donald Trump has put in place. You know, and it is so. It is also significant in that what he has done, is he has reinforced the historic imbalance in global trade systems. That's what he has done. So we can conclude by saying that the imposition of a 10% tariff on Jamaican export may appear justified through the lens of domestic economic policies. The broader implications, economic, diplomatic, and ethical, suggest that it would be a deeply counterproductive measure. The path forward must involve cooperation. It must involve cooperation. But in the same measure, you will have some people arguing for the Donald Trump tariff, right? Proponents of it might contend that a 10% tariff is a legitimate economic tool that can serve multiple strategic purposes. First, they'll argue that tariffs protect domestic industries. Jamaican exports such as agriculture, goods, raw material, and certain manufactured goods may be competitively priced due to lower labor and production costs. And they are saying that a tariff could level the playing field for US producers. And to some extent, I would argue that even United States not produce ackee, for one. So the United States don't produce Blue Mountain coffee. So clearly, the price of Blue Mountain coffee and other things like the yam and so on that is widely used in the diasporal market. The pricing regime as it is will there's no way that it could affect the United States manufacturers, because what are the things that Jamaica import from America now? Well, let's look at it. In terms of agriculture, we import mainly, I see a lot of American apples flooding the markets, even on the streets, the supermarket, and a lot of American fruits. These are not things that we have to buy. As much as I love American apple, and that's what I buy, But these are not things that we have to buy. As much as I love it, to the extent that I love it, I could easily suppress my taste so as to avoid the fallout from the imbalance or the imbalance in terms of export and import. We don't export our apples abroad. We don't do it, right? We have not tried to see our apples would fare in the U.S. market, and I think this is where Jamaica is lacking in a lot of things, even in agro-processing. Yes, we know that the apples are seasonal and all that, but in the modern age of agriculture, I'm quite sure that these things could be re-engineered to have year-round production, right? But as we know, Jamaica is not a country that clearly promote that level of scientific agriculture that could sort of shape our export market, So this is an area that probably we'll have to look at. So I'll conclude that yes, Trump say he might use it before the conclusion. Trump say it could be a negotiating instrument for him, right? So if the United States perceive that trade with Jamaica is asymmetrical, or believe Jamaica is not providing adequate market access for regulatory reciprocity, then yes, the tariff. But the amount of American goods we may see on the Jamaican market right now tells me that we are reciprocating even more. And even with the balance of trade situation, suggests to me that we are reciprocating even more than America. So even if and they'll argue to that, even though it's a modest, it might be modest in scale. They feel that such a tariff generated revenue, government revenue, in times of fiscal pressure, which the United States experience, and knowing that Trump want to, you know, you get extra revenue to finance it, make his tax cut permanent, the tax cut that he had actually put in place during his first term. The only advantage I see to Jamaica right now, and it could be long term, it could be long term, and this is the issue. This is the main issue, but we have to start somewhere. If these tariffs force us to reduce our trade deficit by encouraging more local production, it would be a good thing for us. And probably that's where we need to start looking at how it can help us to pivot away from the exports from the United States and encourage our own food security, right? So it can have that effect. But then again, it comes to leadership in Jamaica. Now we have to wonder if our leaders have the kind of insight, the kind of the kind of leadership that is needed to put Jamaica, in a situation where we start to encourage in a large way, and not only encourage, but come with policies to force it. If we have to force it, we have to force it, because food security is important. So if the policies have to be tailored to force the ramping up of domestic production, I don't know, but then it would be worthwhile. It would be worthwhile, because then it's not only worthwhile in terms of reducing the dependence on imports, thus saving our foreign exchange money, but it will also important in the area of food security. Every country must be able to feed themselves, because in times of war, in times of acts of God, right? You have to have the kind of surplus within your own country that can feed your people. It is not difficult for Jamaica to feed the 3 million people we have here and those in the diaspora. But our leaders, they talk about production. But at the same time, you don't see the policies on the ground that encourage the kind of production, that can give us surplus here a yard, and give us enough here at large, and then the surplus for export purposes. We don't see the focus on or domestic agriculture. We don't see the focus on warehousing, for example, refrigeration, that sort of thing, processing. We don't see the large scale focus on these things, right? Which must come with any pitch towards increase agricultural production. Any leap in that area must also come with some other thing, other than the mechanized situation that encourages farm, that helps farmers to in their production. We also need the kind of warehousing. We need the kind of the refrigerating aspect of it, the agro-processing aspect of it must come in tandem with the ramp up agriculture. Just the other day, I heard the mayor of Spanish Town, Norman Scott, speaking somewhere, and he was highlighting the issue with tomato down there in St. Elizabeth. and he was saying that the farmers down there now have tomato, to use a Jamaican a Jamaican phrase, a stone dog, right? We shouldn't have a situation like that because tomatoes can be processed into many things, right? Other than ketchup, tomato can be processed into other things. But it's a limitation in terms of our agri producers. They are so limited to a particular commodity that they don't explore other byproducts that can be accrued from, say, a tomato. And yes, we are definitely seeing uh, a rise in tomato production. I was in Spanish Town just yesterday at the market, and I see tomato down there for $100 a pound. I mean, that tell you how much the crop is in abundance, right? But what do we do? What do we do? In a couple of months from now, you're gonna see tomato gone up back to $500 a pound because we don't possess the capacity to harness the surplus right now and create byproducts from it that we can use in times of scarcity or less supply, put it that way, on the market. So yes, the trade, the 10% trade tariff that is inflicted on Jamaica and other Caribbean countries, it whereas it has its disadvantages in terms of how it will impact on our local producers and manufacturers, but it can also help us to change course, and that is to ramp up our productive machinery. Our agricultural sector need to get in on the act, and we need to move deliberately, intentionally, right, to establish food security at home. And we need to go on a campaign simultaneously to let Jamaicans know the importance of eating what we grow. This is so significant. So, yes, we, you know, as a country, we need leaders who are ready to take that leap and defy all criticism, defy popularity, and forget politics and think about the country. I hear Lisa Hanna say something the other day in a post, and I was very heartened by it because, in my view, that's how I think that's where the country needs to go. It's exactly where it needs to go. We need to take the best from thinkers in the Labour Party and the best from thinkers in the People's National Party. And we need to collaborate in such a way that, because it can only help the country if we can do this. But because of this partisan divide, and the tribalism, we, and I say this all the time. I say we need a leader. We need leaders. Not only a leader, we need leaders who has a broader nationalistic inclination. We need that in our country today. We don't have leaders who promote Jamaica to the fullest. We don't have leaders who believe in Jamaica and believe in the potentials of this country. Right? And clearly, because they are so self-serving, because they're just about themselves, and So that nationalistic fervor has eluded them in a lot of way. And yes, yeah, no, they will come out and they will give good speeches and fancy speeches about Jamaica. But does their actions, lined up with their utterances? I'm the first to tell you no. As a journalist in this country for more than more than 30 years, I can tell you that it don't line up. I've covered these politicians. I've listened to them and I've seen them make beautiful speeches. But like I said, their actions doesn't line up with their utterances. And this is a detriment to developing the country. I listened to Floyd Green, a vibrant young minister of agriculture. And yes, he speak from time to time about food security. But then one has to wonder whether or not he's doing enough to promote that level of food security that he is speaking about. And yes, he will tell you, yes, he is. Yeah, Floyd will tell you that, and he will come and he will give you a lot of programs that the ministry is spearheading and rolling out and so on to ramp up production in certain areas. But like I said, it has to be supplemented with another aspect, and that is the warehousing, which encompass the cold storage and all of that. And then we have to have a vibrant trade and commerce ministry, with supplemented by the requisite staff, of civil servants that is geared towards looking for markets, not only in the US, but alternate markets all over the world to dispense of our products. So the whole thing have to be structured a little different. We can't do things the same way we have been doing things over and over and expect a different result. That's insanity, right? We have to start look at the thing in a scientific way and structure it a little different now. I mean, it might not be in my lifetime. I might not even see it. But if we start somewhere, we will get there. And a lot of people might think that I am promoting a particular philosophy or a particular ideology when I will say this. That if we had stuck to the Michael Manley way of thinking and the Michael Manley ideology, we'd be far ahead today. Right? If we are just, and I have to blame both governments for this, because PJ Patterson, who run this country for 18 years, if he had just continued the Michael Manley philosophy in its purest sense, eat what we grow what we eat, empower the farmers. Can we remember land lease and all them things, which was designed to empower farmers? And of course, they had their moments, because probably at the time they weren't structured in a way for overarching accountability. So yes, but the concept was what was good. And still good right now, especially in a time where we're talking about food security. And if anything, the pandemic shows us the importance of that. That is something that Michael Manley was talking about from in the 70s, food security. And he was such a visionary that he tried to match his rhetoric with action. Because we had things like the AMC. I am old enough to remember that. Right? So yes, he had a vision, but what I'm critical of is that the oversight and the accountability that should come with these policies, that sector That like for example, I'll give you an example. In America, you have the inspector general in the departments, right? So he has not that you don't still have corruption, you do, but it is minimal because you have a watchdog, so to speak, that guide these what we call best practices, and see to it that they are observed, right? So yes, that was around. He started it, but successive governments have not continued that philosophy. So this is where we find ourselves today in a changing world. We really have a mad person in the United States can impose willy-nilly taxes all over the place without carefully looking at the different economies worldwide and see how they impact on the U.S. Trade balance, lack of or lack thereof. You know, so this is what we have, and if we had continue to build on these policies of eat what we grow. That was a slogan that I can remember as a young man growing up in the 70s, going to school, high school, and all that. That was it. Eat what we grow. Eat what we grow. We should not have deviated from that policy and allow the country to plunge itself into a dependence on US goods, right? That consume our foreign exchange and plunge us into this trade deficit that we now experience and will reel from with a 10% tariff. So, yes, you know, this is my first live from Cover Story, and I choose to ventilate this particular topic because I've been thinking about it and I feel strongly about it. You will see more lives every Saturday at this time, and we'll broaden the base so as to get more viewership. Thank you very much from Cover Story.